Okay, as mentioned earlier, I am Mr. De Lange, or as many of the staff members know me as Jalaine. I'm from the postgraduate section. I'm joined here today by my colleague, Ms. Warda Mohammed. She will be attending to the chats. So if any of you have any questions, you can just post it there, and she will reply to that. Before we start, I'd like to just thank the uh, faculty of health sciences for the opportunity to present the submissions. So, before submitting your research documents for assessment to the postgraduate section for assessment, please take note of the following. Okay, so you will either submit a treatise, a dissertation, or thesis for assessment. Now, when submitting, you want to make sure that the title you submit to the faculty, when you submitted your intention to submit for research for assessment, corresponds with the title on your research document that you submit for assessment purposes. And yes, we do know that some titles may change or differ to what was originally indicated due to ongoing research, which makes it necessary for the title to change to be in line with the field of study. But please make sure that you alert the faculty of the title change so that it corresponds with the examination panel that we receive from them. The examination panel is a document with your details, your title, your supervisor's details, and all the examiners your research must be sent to for assessment. So upon receiving your research document, the first thing we check is your title, the first page. So the title must correspond with the one on the examination, approved examination panel. If it does not approve, we'll have to go back to the faculty and query if the title change was made and which title is correct, which may cause some delays in sending off your research for assessment. Accompanying documentation for your submission would be a signed permission to submit letter from your supervisor for assessment. But please make sure that you submit the correct document. Although you have completed your research and it is your final document that you are submitting, you should not attach the submission for final copies document. It should say for assessment copies. Again, if that letter is not attached the correct letter, we'll have to request the correct letter from you, and that will may cause further delays in sending your research for assessment. Uh, and this is one that we come across a lot is the words research subject to a confidentiality agreement. Um, yes, it is your own work and you've worked maybe a years, a long while to get to this point, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should add the words, the confidentiality clause to your front cover. You must make sure, if you're not sure, you must please query with your faculty or supervisor if it is indeed necessary to put a clause, as it is important because we need to alert the library also once you submit your final copies. So we get to the submission process. So once all the above has been adhered to, you will submit a single file in PDF format. The single file should not be bigger than 10 megabytes with your accompanying documents, and it must be submitted to the correct hashtag folder. I'll just scroll up so you can see. So for example, it should say hashtag assess underscore health, your surname, your initials, and your student number. Only assessment copies that was sent to the correct to PG exams with appropriate hashtag will be processed. All other submissions will be ignored. If you do not submit according to the outline procedure, You take responsibility for any delays in finalizing your assessment process. And with that, from experience, I've received um, research sent to my personal emails, to my work email, or they just send it to the examinations department. But there's a difference. If you send to the examination department, it does not come to us directly, and we do not have access to the undergrad examinations postbox. Although we in the same and fall under examinations, you must submit to the PG exams with the correct hashtag. The doctoral students must submit a citation of 100 words in Microsoft Word format together with a PDF copy of their thesis. This citation, it must solely consist of the following information: your achievements, and it should be divided into two sections: your previous qualifications, the appraisal of the academic merit of the thesis, and also note that the length of 100 words excludes the section and the title. Doctoral students should also submit a manuscript in article format to their supervisors. The manuscripts must contain the following: it must be prepared in the format required by an appropriate accredited journal. It must be submitted to the supervisor within the 6 weeks of the submission of the thesis for examination, but not later than 6 weeks before your graduation ceremony at which the degree will be awarded. And please take note that when submitting, the due dates are very important. Okay, the assessment process, timeline, and next steps. The master's thesis and dissertation takes 4 to 6 weeks to assess. The doctoral thesis takes 6 weeks to assess, but please note it takes 4 weeks from when your research reaches the examiner that has to assess your research. So not from the day that you submit to the examinations department, the postgrad examination department. As I mentioned earlier, that because sometimes also there's issues that we need to resolve before you send your research off for assessment. So 4 weeks is not from the day you submitted or the 6 weeks. Once the examiner returns the reports, it will be considered at the postgraduate studies committee, and you will be notified in writing of the outcome from your faculty manager. Once you receive the outcome, you will also be um, given the reports, anonymized reports, and if there were any annotations made in the PDF submission, you will also be provided with a copy. Your supervisor will then discuss and oversee any amendments that you need to make to your research that was suggested by the examiner. And once everything is concluded, you'll be ready for submission. Please note that if the degree is awarded, final copies of the research must be submitted. Resubmission work resubmitted within three months, and for doctoral students, it must be in the 6 months period. Okay, for the submission of final copies for the purpose of graduation, it would be basically the same as for your assessment copies. You should also make sure that your titles is the same as the title with your faculty. Um, the permission letter to submit final copies. And also, when you submit, you will have to submit to the hashtag folder, but the hashtag folder would be for final copies. And also make sure that your decoration page inside your research document has been signed. Also note that in terms of the general rules, students that does not affect the corrections as directed or did not submit the final copy will be regarded as not having complied with the requirements and will not receive qualification. And students who have not submitted the final copy to the postgraduate section will not be eligible for graduation and also will not be included in the graduation program. Please take note of the important dates. The last day for submission of your research for assessment is the 5th of August. Please make sure that you submit before the time or on the last day. Yes, you can request an extension, but or you can submit after the due date, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be able to graduate in December of 2022, and your graduation might be shifted to autumn graduation of April 2023. So the 5th of October is the final date for approval of the M&D degree assessment reports and approval of manuscripts in article format for the doctoral students. And the 11th of November is the final date for submission of the final copies for your treatise, dissertation, or thesis. On my next slide, I'm just sharing the information of my colleague. She's currently on leave, but she's the contact person and she handles your faculty. It is Ms. Rangana, and below is contact details. And right underneath where assessment and final submission documentation can be found is a link where you can find the declaration pages, the permission letters, and all documentation necessary for submission. I will now hand over to my colleague, Ms. Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jelaine. Thank you, colleagues. I'll not take much of your time, but once you have submitted your final copies, we then get an instruction from the faculty manager to link students for graduation. So what would follow after submission of your final copies, you will be linked for graduation purposes, and then all the information relating to graduation will be received from the examination office. And what usually happens is you will receive an invitation to attend the graduation ceremonies via email, and this is to your student email. And you will RSVP whether you will attend or whether it will be in absentia. And then that is for graduation purposes. And also once the degrees have been conferred, you will then get a follow-up email where you will then be able to download your electronic or your web degree certificate, which must be stored securely. And then that is basically the summary of submitting for assessment and taking you up to your graduation ceremony. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Thank you so much for that presentation. I hope the students were paying attention. Are there any questions? There's a question on the chat. How long should a student wait to hear feedback after submitting for examination? Can they follow up with exam themselves or via the faculty? That's the question from the chat.
Okay, the students is welcome to follow up with a post-examination officer that is responsible for the faculty. Say once the 4 week or the time period has lapsed, they can follow up in a week's time.
Okay, so they need to check with the cutoff time, and then if there's no response, then they can follow up after that. Is that what you're saying, Mr. De Lange?
Yes, but like I said, they are welcome to follow up. But we would advise students to just be patient, as it sometimes takes a bit longer, as examiners, as the workload, or they also have their students that they are busy supervising. So it might take a bit more time than the 4 weeks or 6 weeks that's necessary.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the online participants or delegates, or from the floor? Okay, and then when do you start publishing the dates for the following year, like the 2023 dates? When do you start publishing those?
Thank you, Prof. The dates for assessment are guided by our rules in the general prospectus. So for submission for assessment, it is usually there are two periods of submission. If you are submitting in August, it is always the first Friday of August that you submit for assessment, and then your final copies are usually submitted 3 weeks prior to the ceremonies, your graduation ceremonies. When you come to your December submission period, it is always your first Friday in December for submission of assessment copies, and then it is 3 weeks prior to your graduation ceremonies, which usually takes us into the middle of March for submission of the final copies for graduation purposes.